Alright, so Chito Vera just posted a video to his YouTube channel following his unanimous decision loss to Deiveson Figueiredo. And in true Chito fashion, I just once again get the feeling that this guy continues to not take accountability for the real reasons why his losses don't go his way. Because at this point, fans of the sport are well aware of Chito's lack of volume and activity being the biggest issues in his overall fight game, but instead of acknowledging that he once again left too much in the gas tank against Figgy, Chito instead pins the result of the fight on returning to the octagon too early, which is fair. But he also spends a lot of time in this video complaining about an illegal strike thrown by Figgy, which is an insanely hypocritical thing for him to say. Especially seeing as Chito has a very long history of throwing illegal strikes himself, and yeah, I have a lot to say about that specific point. Anyways, let's get into the video itself. After talking about how he enjoyed his time in Abu Dhabi, Chito immediately admits to the fact that he probably turned around his last fight against Sean O'Malley at UFC 299 way too quickly. And I definitely agree with Chito on this, and even though this can be seen as an excuse by some people to justify why he lost, I can at the very least respect that he's taking some accountability for making a misstep in his career. He says that his original plan was to return to the cage in November or December, and seeing as Sean hasn't even returned to the octagon yet, yeah, I think that Chito should have taken considerably more time to rest and recover before rushing back into the cage. That being said, I can definitely understand the desire to try to get back into the win column after getting brutalized in his first ever title shot. However, the part of this video that definitely irked me a little bit is hearing Chito complain about Figgy's last strike that he threw at the end of the first round.
The only thing that I want to take away from this fight, or at least I want to start with, it was like that axe kick that he landed on the first round that wasn't an accident, that went straight to my face. I feel that should have been taken a point deducted.
So if you haven't seen the fight yet, at the very end of the first round, Figgy threw an axe kick to Chito's face while Chito was flat on his back. Who knows if Figgy was intentionally aiming the kick to Chito's face, but illegal is illegal. Chito says that the ref should have immediately deducted a point, and seeing as the fight was a 29-28 decision win for Figgy, then a point deduction would have changed the entire landscape of the fight. And although just the visual of Figgy axe kicking a downed opponent in the face definitely isn't pretty, I personally don't think that necessarily warrants an immediate point deduction. And before I go any further, just to be fair to Chito here, Figgy has for sure shown to be a bit of a dirty fighter throughout his entire UFC career. Like in his flyweight title defense win over Alex Perez, he definitely grabbed the cage twice to avoid being taken down, only to submit Alex immediately after. Also, when Alex tapped to Figgy's guillotine, he definitely held on to the choke a little bit longer than what is reasonable. Figgy has also fouled Brandon Moreno a lot throughout their 4 fights they had against each other. I mean, in the first fight against Brandon, he literally got a point deducted for kicking Brandon in the balls repeatedly amongst other fouls. So yeah, with all of this being said, Figgy is definitely not an example of being a clean fighter in the slightest, but you know what? I wouldn't say that Chito's any better. Because even though Chito is justified in being upset about Figgy's illegal axe kick, Chito himself threw a late strike at the end of the second round. And I'm just going to point out here that Chito's late strike is a bit harder to justify as an accident compared to Figgy's axe kick, seeing as Chito threw his punch noticeably after the bell was done ringing. So I'm not entirely sure how Chito can make an argument of having Figgy get a point deducted for an illegal strike when Chito also threw an illegal strike in the very next round. Not only that, Chito has a very long history of throwing strikes after the bell has already rung. The first example I can think of is Chito throwing a late strike against Song Yadong at the end of the second round of their fight in 2020.
But we'll get to a third round. It comes up after this.
And again, to be fair to Chito, this one kinda blurs the line between legal and illegal, because although the horn is still sounding while he throws the knee, Chito starts throwing his knee while the horn is already well underway. You can even see and hear Song's corner, namely Uriah Faber, protesting the late strike, and they're clearly not happy with what Chito did here. And I think that it's important to mention the horn only sounds when the round clock officially hits 0, so yeah, this is technically an illegal strike. In the final round of Chito's fight against Jose Aldo, after getting controlled by Jose for the entirety of the round where it was 1-1 going into the third, Chito throws a late illegal strike once again while the ending horn is sounding off.
Due to win. Exactly what Andre Pederneiras asked for. He went out there and did it and won the third round.
Well, that third round.
Clearly, Chito was really frustrated with how this round went, seeing as it was an even ball game, but that doesn't really justify throwing a dirty shot as the round was officially over. Jose also takes offense to what Chito did here because after Chito hits him with the late elbow, Jose immediately throws his hands up in the air in protest. Kinda just seems like a sore loser move from Chito, and just hold on to that thought because I'm going to talk about how Chito has a history of having sour grapes after his losses in a moment. Next, in his fight against Frankie Edgar, Chito definitely throws an after the horn up kick to the face at the very end of the first round.
And also because of this, he's more than willing to accept being on his back.
Again, much like his late shots thrown against Song Yadong and Jose Aldo, he threw this upkick while the horn was noticeably already airing, making it by the books an illegal strike. As you can imagine, Frankie wasn't happy with Chito's action here, and you can immediately see him turn to the referee and protest the upkick. Not only that, at the end of the second round, Chito commits possibly the most despicable act in the history of the UFC by giving the middle finger to Frankie Edgar. Alright, and sure, admittedly, this isn't illegal yet according to the rules of MMA, but flipping off the legend Frankie Edgar should be punishable by death, at least in my opinion. But that's really kind of just scratching the surface when it comes to Chito's obvious fouls. I mean, take a look at Chito's first fight against Davey Grant back in 2018. Chito was deducted a point by Mark Goddard for making repeated fouls ranging from hooking his fingers within Davey's gloves 3 times, once in every single round of the fight, and it even looks like he tries to go for an illegal upkick on Davey in the third round as well. Then, in his fight against Frankie Saenz, where he won by KO, you can clearly see Chito throw multiple blatant shots to the back of the head during the finishing sequence. Was the fight already over by that point? Sure, maybe. But every fighter knows the rules, and Chito still threw those shots to one of the very few illegal areas of the body that you shouldn't be throwing to. Alright, and those are all of Chito's fouls that I can think of just off of the top of my own mind. I'm sure that you guys can probably think of a lot more fouls that he's committed throughout his UFC career that I haven't even mentioned in this video, whether it be hooking the gloves, throwing late strikes, or grabbing the cage. Moreover, and here's kind of my main point for this entire video, even just ignoring all of the flagrant fouls he's made throughout his UFC fights, past and present, I'd have a lot more understanding for Chito's complaints following his Figgy fight if Chito hasn't already demonstrated that time and time again he's a pretty sore loser. And I'm not going to say that he's necessarily a sore loser in every single one of his losses, but at least in recent memory, it really seems like Chito has a hard time taking his losses in stride. Going back to the Song Yadong fight, Chito threw a temper tantrum in the cage when the judge's decision was announced.
I'm here with the winner.
No, fuck that, fuck that.
And even though I'm not going to criticize him too much for being upset that the judges scored the fight for Song, I really don't agree with him acting like such a dick to Dong himself, seeing as when Song went in to shake Chito's hand, Chito said fuck that right in his face and refused to shake his hand. And honestly, in my opinion, that fight was a really close fight regardless of what Joe Rogan had to say on the commentary booth. And seeing as it was such a close fight, I don't really agree with Chito acting like he was robbed of a clear decision victory, because I just watched this fight back right now to make this video, and I'm still not sure how I scored this fight all these years later. But again though, even if Chito didn't like the outcome of the fight, it doesn't justify him being so disrespectful towards his opponent. Taking a look back at the Jose Aldo fight, Chito threw that elbow at the very end of the fight because he was salty that Aldo played that last round smart and clutched the decision win. It's not like Chito thought that that late elbow was going to knock Jose out and he would win a miraculous KO off of it. He threw it because he was frustrated with the situation. And he took out his frustration on Jose when he should have been more upset with himself for giving up that position. Another example is after he got utterly destroyed by Sean O'Malley earlier this year in their title fight rematch, Chito came up with some ridiculous accusations that Sean supposedly greased his hair and that made it impossible for Chito to grab a hold of him. But this is a stupid ass excuse for Chito to try and pull, seeing as at no point in the fight did Chito even try to engage in any wrestling or grappling with Sean, so where is this even coming from? Like, after getting pulverized by Sean for 5 rounds where Chito once again struggled to get out of first gear, Chito has the audacity to accuse Sean of greasing his hair. And now here we are following his loss to Figgy, and he's calling out how Figgy should have had a point deducted for the illegal axe kick when Chito himself threw a blatant illegal strike at the end of the second round. Like, for the love of God, Chito, please spare us your sour grapes because it's already gotten old at this point. The truth of the matter is, Chito seems to have a hard time accepting accountability for his inherent flaws in his fighting style. Because although I do consider Chito a pretty good fighter, he has some obvious issues with putting on a proper pace during his fights, and in all of his losses, he repeatedly makes the mistake of fighting too passively. And even in a lot of his wins like Rob Font, Frankie Edgar, and Dominic Cruz, he's been able to bail himself out of trouble because he has good power for bantamweight, and in those performances, he was able to stay patient until he landed a big shot. But I think that's also convinced him that he just needs to wait for his opportunities instead of making them happen. So honestly, I'm pretty tired of hearing Chito come up with all of these excuses as to why he loses fights fair and square, when the reality of the situation is that his losses stem from him and his inability to get out of first gear. And speaking in regards to these new batch of complaints about his loss to Figgy, I really don't understand how Chito feels like he has the right to be complaining about getting fouled when this guy has such an illustrious history of committing fouls throughout his entire career. I don't know, it's kind of just baffling to me. Anyways, definitely let me know your thoughts on all things Chito Vera. How justified do you feel Chito is for complaining about Figgy's illegal axe kick, and do you think he has the room to be making these complaints given his own fouls in the past? As always, if you like the video, then like the video and subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. I appreciate you guys for watching, and I will see you on the next one. Bye.